Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted southern horror queen, coming to you live from under a full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. We're just getting back from corrupting the masses in Port Gibson, Mississippi, and I gotta tell you, we had a freaking blast. It was really cool to meet some down-home folks, kind of brought me back down to my roots just a little bit. Yeah, I was raised in the woods, y'all. They still don't have red lights where I came from. That ain't no lie, neither. So anyway, Port Gibson was freaking awesome. The people there were great. The cars, oh my God, there were some phenomenal cars at this show. There is all kinds of crazy haunted history going on in Port Gibson as well. Now, I didn't have enough time to put everything together to throw it into this week's show. So next week, I got all kind of stuff to tell you guys about. Yeah, all kind of haunted history. Like I said, there in a few actual personal experiences that we had while we were there. So I can't wait to tell you about all of that stuff. So, all right, let me get my shout outs out right quick like, and then we're shifting into a whole nother gear of the madness here. So here's a big wet creepy chick kiss coming to the Adrian's Fury Dragster sponsors. We got Renegade Racing Fuel, D&M Graphics, Surreal Studios, and of course my favorite, Naked Wines. Freddie, why is it you always pop up right when I'm fixing to take a big old swig of wine? You know it's time. You just went and popped the cork on a bottle, didn't you? I know you did. Don't lie. That is awesome right there. Yum. Hello, Freddie. All right, so while I'm at it, I'm going to sling out one. I'm well, physically I'm well, but you know me mentally. It's always just toss of the dice, right? So anyway, another big old creepy chick kiss coming out to my publisher, Pandora's Box, and to Valente Talent. I am looking forward to killing it in 2018, y'all. Just hang on. It's going to be a hell of a ride, right? Hey, there's Ronnie and Lori Owens. Good to see you. And there is Selva. I'm glad to see you popping in tonight. That's a new face this evening. So speaking of killing it, y'all know what you got to do right about now. Oh, yeah. It's time to get up and dim those lights and kick out the kids, lock the doors, and grab your very own tasty adult beverage because we're about to get our scary on up in here, y'all. That is actually Apotheca wine right there. And that's some badass Merlot. I love it. Hey, Uncle Dub. There's my boy joining in from Carrier, Mississippi. All right. So tonight I'm going to kick it off with the Whaley House in San Diego. Now, let me roll out a little bit of the history behind this bad boy so we can kind of understand why all the madness is that goes on there, what got it all kicked off, right? So in 1852, this tall, lanky dude rides into San Diego. Now, Yankee Jim was a thug, and it didn't take him very long before he stirred up enough shit over there to where everybody in town knew exactly who this dude was, and none of them had any kind of warm and fuzzy feelings about him either. So, obviously, old Jim was a nasty bastard, but it wasn't his character flaws that made him so famous. Check this out, y'all. This dude had way overstayed his welcome, and the day finally came when the town folk decided they had about enough of his bullshit. So it wasn't a whole lot longer after that when he actually finds himself locked up in jail and he's waiting to be hanged, right? Now, I'm going to say this. It only took the townsfolk about 2.2 seconds before they decided they were going to execute this dude, no matter what. He was going down, right? But they did have the decency to at least call in the local priest and have Jim baptized before it all went down. Now, hey, Whaley, there's my girl over there in Washington Parish. Good to see you tonight, sweetness. So they've got the dude baptized, and he's just sitting there waiting. Well, meanwhile, while he's waiting, across the street on this pretty little vacant lot, they're putting up the gallows for him. Now, this little lot was conveniently close to the local graveyard. So it's right across the street from the jail. You got the gallows, and then right down from the little lot, you've got the cemetery. So, yeah, that's a pretty cool little setup for somebody that's fixing to get lynched, right? So this pretty little lot had been the scene of more than just a few of these lynchings, both before and after poor old Yankee Jim. Yeah, hey, there's Jamesh Dean. Good to see you tonight, sweetheart. So now the gallows are finished, and it was time for a freaking hanging, right? So the hangman takes old Jim, and he leads him to the back of this buckboard wagon, and then he slides a noose over around his neck and tightens it up good and snug. So old Jim's fighting to keep his feet on the platform of this buckboard wagon for as long as he possibly could. But, of course, you know he's fighting for no good reason. Hey, Susie, good to see you, sweetheart. So the wagon eventually gets jerked out from underneath him, and now old Jim's hanging by his neck. But there was a problem. It seemed like nobody taken into consideration the fact that Jim was so tall. So he's hanging from his neck, but his toes are still touching the ground. So he's just dangling there and dancing around on his tippy toes while he's fighting for every little breath, trying to hang on there. So, yeah, it turned into quite a long lynching at that point in time. But in the crowd, watching on, was this handsome young entrepreneur named Thomas Whaley. Now, Thomas is sitting there with a big old grin on his face. But he's not laughing at Yankee Jim. He's got some plans for that pretty little lot that they've got the gallows set up on. So 2 years later, this handsome investor has made one hell of a deal, and he purchases this lot. And now he's starting to plan to build the biggest and most fancy and most elaborate mansion in the entire area on this lynching lot. So Whaley, yeah, he might have been pretty to look at, but apparently wasn't real bright, right? It's like the not the prettiest crayon in the box. Anyway, all the locals are trying to tell him, they're warning him, look, this lot is cursed by all these wicked souls of these men that have been hanged there. But Whaley just didn't listen. He went off shaking his head, and he decided he was going to do whatever the hell he wanted to do anyway. Hey, Michael Martello's in the house tonight, y'all. That's a local boy from Independence here. So by 1856, there's this grand Greek revival estate sitting smack dab in the middle of that lot where the gallows had been sitting 2 years early. Well, the trouble had pretty much already started at that point, because before the Whaley family were even officially moved into this house, they had the contractors that had been in there working on putting the house together, as well as Thomas Whaley himself, had seen and heard this big lurching black shadowy figure walking up and down the halls there. Hey, Johnny Alfonso, good to see you tonight, sweetheart. So he's walking up and down the halls, and Thomas Whaley said that he could hear these big, heavy footsteps coming down the hall, too. So because the Yankee Jim had been so huge and had had such a traumatic death there at the gallows on that pretty little lot before the house was built, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that that's exactly who it was that was haunting this house. So, you know, the guy was kind of asking for it. He actually designed the house where the archway that separates the dining room from the den set exactly where the gallows were, where Yankee Jim and a whole lot of people before and after him had been hung. So, you know, pretty, like I said, just not real smart. But besides Thomas and besides all the construction workers that had worked on building this house, Thomas's wife, Anna, was well aware of Yankee Jim hanging around there, too. She said that every single moment of every single day, she felt like she was surrounded by something inside this house. And there had been a few occasions where Anna actually saw Yankee Jim. Now, she described him as this huge, terrifying giant of a man with big, gaping eyes. Now, Anna pretty much blamed Yankee Jim for all of the torments that she was going to experience in this home. And that started in 1858, just 2 years after they moved in, when her 18-month-old son died from scarlet fever. Well, it took a while, but after the sting of his death kind of wore off a little bit, they kind of got some good news. Her daughter Violet came back home and had some happy news. She was going to get married, so everybody's kind of excited, and they're distracted from the fact that they've just lost this little boy, and they're all planning a wedding. It's going to be awesome. Well, come to find out, the new husband was a con artist, and he wound up ditching old Violet on the honeymoon, and he disappears off the face of the freaking planet. Well, Violet comes home, and she's maddened by depression, and she turns into a recluse and hardly ever leaves the second floor of this house again. Well, one day, Violet let her crazy loose, and she shoots herself in the chest with her father's gun. Hey, Raphael is joining in, too. So not very long after Violet's suicide came yet another tragedy. Now, the younger Whaley children were outside playing in the backyard with this other little neighborhood girl, friend of theirs. So they're all running around like a bunch of heathens, you know, like kids do. And this little girl wasn't paying attention to what she was doing, and she goes hauling ass through the backyard and runs into a clothesline. So she broke her neck and died right there in the backyard. You know, it was bad, but it wouldn't be bad for her, at least for a little while, because a couple years after that, one of the Whaley's grandchildren accidentally ingested poison and died inside the house. So there's two eternal playmates to just hang out in the backyard of the Whaley house for the rest of time, playing and acting like heathens if they want to. So besides all the mounting deaths that went down on this property, the house was actually used for a few other things while it existed as the family residence. It was at one time the Thomas Whaley General Store. It was also used as a courthouse. So there's a little bit more trauma for you. I know, Whaley, right? Just craziness there. It went from trauma to drama when the Whaleys decided they would lease out the upper level of the house to the Tanner Troupe Theater. So there was always something going on at this joint. I'm surprised any of them saw any kind of ghost with all this craziness going on around there. But regardless, they all did. After Anna and Thomas died, the house was inherited by other relatives, and for 150 years, the legends of all these ghosts, including Yankee Jim, have persisted even until this day. Hey, Mary Sue Mosley's joining in, another local. So in this house, you've got chairs that rock and chandeliers that swing, doors that open and close on their own. And then there's invisible fingers playing haunting melodies on a piano that's not even there anymore. Hey, Cody Hollers is in the house. 405 in the house, y'all. So there's also the sounds of cutlery against fine china. It's, of course, accompanied by the smell of fresh baked breads and pies, and oh yeah, the scent of Cuban tobacco and French perfume, also ever present in the halls here at the Whaley House. Now, activity isn't exactly limited to ghosts of the human sort, because the Whaleys had this thing with their four-legged family members. They were animal people, just like me and Big Johnny Blender. And there's been a whole lot of people that have reported seeing Dolly the dog and Winks the cat chasing each other through the house and out the back door through the garden. A couple of photographs of that are actually hanging around, too. I done said 405's in the house. Big Johnny Blender's late. He's old. He's slow, Cody. So anyway, other folks have heard the disembodied pounding of a gavel echoing to the courtroom. Some invisible judge that's handing down his sentence. Then there's laughter and there's music from vaudeville days from that dance troupe. And, of course, that's seeping from all of those upper-level rooms. There's the sound of violins and guitars and, of course, the piano. And those are all those haunting reminders of these big balls and parties that used to go down there way back in the day. Then, of course, there's the pitter-patter of tiny little feet scampering down the hallways and the clicking of dainty high-heeled slippers and rustling of silk skirts as well. Glenn Harrison, glad to see you in the house tonight, sweetness. So there's also the legend of the ninth step in the Whaley House. Now, that got kicked off a little bit later when folks started realizing and reporting that they were experiencing this odd sort of pressure when they were trying to walk up the stairs. And it always happened right there on that ninth step. So what people are presuming is that it's the revenant of Anna Whaley reliving that tragic moment when she was headed upstairs and heard Violet shoot herself. So that could explain what that terrible pressure is. Hey, Charles Theroux in the house too, and there's Joey. Oh my God, we got a full house tonight. All the creepy kids are here. So Thomas, he of course shows up every once in a while too. He's wearing his traditional clothes and a top hat. They usually see him standing up at the top of the stairs. Now Anna sometimes will appear in this green gingham gown, and she's usually seen hanging around the parlor, sometimes sitting in the settee that's still there at the Whaley House today. And there's a lot of times she's been spotted outside walking around in the garden. Now, according to scores of paranormal investigators and visitors, the spirits of Thomas and Anna, along with tons of other ghosts, are still hanging out there. After all, this pretty much is their home, and I guess they're just not going to show any kinds of signs of leaving. So next up, I got a little local haunt to tell you about. I'm probably saying this wrong, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. The Calcaso Courthouse, which is in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I never heard of this one until a couple of weeks ago, but it sounded interesting, so I thought I'd give it a rundown. Now, this little courthouse, well, it's not a little courthouse. It's a massive courthouse that's been around since 1910. It's rumored to be haunted by this chick that kind of got the raw end of the deal after her trial. Maybe, maybe not. Now, today, the building still looks like it did way back in the day, right when it was first opened up. At the front entrance, there's these huge columns, and in the courtroom, the original jury box and judge's booth are still there, and along with the original witness stand as well, exactly the way they were back in 1910. Now, the room itself is creepy as hell. And folks that have been there say that you can actually feel something hanging around in that room, watching you, just breathing down the back of your neck. Whatever it is that's hanging out there, it ain't happy. So this most famous trial that was held there went back in the day of Tony Joe Henry. Now, Tony Joe was born Annie McQuiston back in 1916. And she didn't really have one of those Disney kind of childhood, y'all. This chick had it pretty rough. Her mama died when she was 6 years old. So when she got a little bit older, she, of course, fell into prostitution. And along with that came the drinking and the drugs. And it's kind of like the 80s. Maybe not. So anyway, during her dealings on the darker side of the law, she runs into this dude named Henry. Now, most folks knew Henry as Cowboy. This dude was a boxer, and he was actually an enforcer for a lot of the crime syndicates there in the area. So he's kind of their muscle. He was the go get my money dude guy. So they fall in love, and Cowboy decides he's going to pull her out of this drug and alcohol-dazed stupor that she's been in. He cleans her up, and it wasn't long after that, and they actually wound up getting married. But the honeymoon didn't last, y'all. Few short weeks after that, Cowboy got caught on the wrong side of the law in Texas, where they don't play that shit, and they hauled his ass to prison in Huntsville. So, hey, there's Daniel Lee Hogg, my favoriteest blacksmith. So, Tony Joe and one of her friends actually had to travel to this prison to go and visit with him. And when she gets there, she goes and talks to the judge and gives the judge her sob story. And she's begging this judge to release her old man. And as you probably already guessed, it didn't really work out the way she had planned it. So on the way back from her unsuccessful trip, Tony Joe and her little friend had to hitchhike. So they wind up crawling in the back of this Ford coupe with a dude named Arthur Calloway. And on their ride home, Tony Joe and her little friend came up with this plan that we're going to change both of their lives forever. They thought it would be a good idea to kill Calloway, steal his clothes and his car, and rob him of all of his cash. That also didn't work out quite exactly how she thought it would. It wasn't long after that she was wound up being tried 3 different times for this crime. So why 3 times? Well, Tony Joe was quite the little charmer, and she had a knack for winning over these judges and the jurors, and eventually, of course, her luck did run out. So she wound up being the only woman in Louisiana to be executed in an electric chair. Now, back in her day, the electric chair was a new technology, and nobody really knew how well it was going to work. So they bought in a whole bunch of extra generators just in case there wasn't enough juice there to do the do. So the historical documents on Tony Joe says that all of her hair was cut short, and the witnesses said that once the chair was powered up, the lights dimmed, and then they got really bright, and they went dim again, and then everybody inside this courthouse was gagging from the smell of burnt skin and hair and cheap perfume. So they must have really amped up that little electric chair, because it fried the hell out of Tony Joe. But anyway, those hauntings there at this courthouse started shortly after that, and they still carry on to this day. Now, folks say that there are all kind of electrical equipment malfunctions there, doors locked, the lights dim sporadically, all over the courthouse. And of course, it's all accompanied by the smell of burned hair and cheap perfume. Making matters worse, also located inside the building is the Calcaso Parish Clerk Court's office. And there's kind of an unwritten rule there that you do not mention the name of Tony Joe Henry during election season, because they say you can never be too cautious during election season, especially when the place you're voting in could be haunted. And that kind of adds a whole new meaning to the phrase ghost voting, doesn't it? I thought that was kind of cool. All right, so next up, I'm talking about the Mizpah Hotel in Tonopah, Nevada. Probably also saying that one wrong too, but it's a hell of a story, so just hang with me here for a minute. So this joint pretty much, to me, looks like a perfect vacation destination. The Mizpah was the most luxurious hotel in Nevada back in the day, and it's still pretty much just as swanky as it was then. There's these thick granite walls and plush Victorian era furniture, and besides all the elegance and all these upscale amenities, this hotel is haunted as hell. Whaley said, great story while eating chicken fajitas. Put some hot sauce on that, girl. So because of all the glitz and glamour, this hotel was actually nicknamed the Grand Old Lady. And of course, all of the socialites of the era made their appearances there. As a matter of fact, it was a favorite hangout for folks like Wyatt Earp and Jack Dempsey. That tells you a little something right there. Yeah, this place was really happening back in the day. And it was also the tallest building in the area up till 1929, and it had the first elevator west of the Mississippi. So yeah, it had all those upscale amenities back in the day. So the Mizpah, among all these other amenities, has more than its share of different ghosts there. And it's been the subject of tons of different paranormal investigations and television series like Ghost Adventures, for one. Now, several misty figures have been captured by all of these investigators, but most of these crews show up there looking for the lady in red. Now, this is a hell of a story right here. So this chick was a kept woman that lived on the 5th floor, compliments of her sugar daddy. Well, one day sugar daddy was going out of town, so he comes by and he spends a little bit of time with his plaything, and then he's off to catch a train. Well, he misses his train. Oh, well, that's no big deal. I'll go shack back up with my side thing for another day, and I'll catch a train again tomorrow. So he turns around and he goes back to the hotel, and when he gets to her room, he swings the door open. He's ready to surprise her, and he's the one that got the surprise because this tramp was in bed with somebody else. So needless to say, he was a little bit pissed, and of course a little spat ensued, and by the time it was over with, this chick is deader than hell in the middle of the hall. So of course that's where she's still seen today, but that is not the only place that she's seen at the Mizpah. Folks have spotted her all over the place, but it's her room where she's most active. Now, it's not the same room that she stayed in back in the day. It's a new room that they completely remodeled in her honor, and it's got like red velvet interiors. Everything is red for the Red Lady. And it seems like she's kind of taken a liking to it, because that's where she hangs out these days, and that's where she's photographed. That's where her voice is captured most of the time, so she's hanging out in the Red Room. Now, besides the spirit of the Red Lady, there are several children that are said to roam around this hotel as well. Now, there's not any history of any kids having died there, so some people assume that they may have visited there at some time and really enjoyed the place, because it was kind of like Disneyland back in the day. They didn't have anything like that. It was like ooh and ah and all this stuff. So these kids enjoyed it so much that apparently after they did pass, they decided that they were going to come back and stay there for a while. And they're still there today. Now, nobody really knows for sure if that's what it is. But regardless of how they wound up there, guests have been complaining for years about hearing these little kids running up and down the hallways. And when the staff searches for the guests with kids to find the guilty parties, more times than not, when they're searching the ledgers for the floors where the complaints are coming from, they're finding that there are no families with children checked in on those levels. Now, these kids are mischievous as hell, too. They're known for tugging at the back of your shirts, playing with your hair, and, of course, all that ghostly giggling that goes on in the hallways late at night. It's not the hooker on the corner. So there are also reports of them speaking with the hotel staff and following around the chambermaids and the maintenance staff and asking them constantly, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? So they love to be aggravated, just like any other typical kid, right? There's also another spirit that still hangs out there. Now, this dude's got a creepy past, too. Senator Key Pittman makes appearances all over this hotel as well. This dude was rumored to have died in the hotel just before the election of 1940. And because they would forfeit the election if people found out he was dead, his party kept his body on ice in a bathtub somewhere in the hotel until the last votes were counted. And as it turned out, he actually did win the election, and then all of a sudden, well, oh, look, here's the senator. He's deader than hell. I don't understand why he's freezing cold, but let's go ahead and get him in the ground, right? Mike Carter, glad to see you joining in tonight. We're talking spooky stuff, so if you want to get your creepy on with us, stay put. We're talking all kind of craziness tonight. So now from a ritzy haunted hotel to a haunted church with a creepy-ass history, I'm talking about the San Fernando Cathedral in San Antonio, Texas. That's a tongue-tire, especially when you've only had, I don't know, a couple sips of wine. I need a little bit more of that, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of the backstory on how this cathedral even came to be a thing. Now, in 1731, 56 Canary Islanders, a handful of missionaries, and few little soldiers were promised these land grants and citizens' rights to settle in Texas. So they sail across the ocean and through the Gulf of Mexico, and then they walk their tired asses all the way to where this supposed little town of Hidalgo was just waiting for them. Well, when they get there, they find out that they're it. There are no buildings. There's no settlement. Hell, there were no people. There were just a bunch of pissed off Apaches that weren't exactly rolling out the red carpet for these dudes, right? Mike said he's all about the creepy stuff. Well, you're at home here, dear. Hey, Rusty, glad to see you tonight. I'm pixelating. Yeah, there's some really bad weather in the area tonight, Susie, so internet's in and out. Kind of crossing my fingers that we'll be able to get through the show. So, yeah, the King of Spain straight up lied to these folks. He sent them there to go and settle in the name of Spain before the French could get their hands on his land. So these poor bastards were left with no choice. All they could do was pull up their big boy panties and start working the land and get settled, or there were going to be some dead folks there pretty soon. So after they finally got things kind of livable, they vowed that they were going to build them a church there. Well, the first cornerstone of this church was laid in 1738. But by then, these Apaches had pretty much had enough of these folks poaching on their territory, and the shit hits the fan, right? So construction got put on the back burner while everybody's killing each other, and eventually both sides had suffered enough casualties where they were ready to call a truce, and so they did. Check this out, y'all. Y'all gonna like this. So the Apache tradition for calling a truce was to dig a deep hole and throw all of their arrows and knives and war clubs and hatchets into the hole and bury it. And that's where the old saying, bury the hatchet, came from. Ah, so you learn things here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show. That's pretty awesome, huh? So once everybody kind of settles back down, the construction kicks back up, and the church winds up being finished around 1750. Now, it didn't look anything back then like it does today. There's been some huge remodels and additions, and all kind of stuff is going on since the original construction. But there have been some serious hauntings in this joint for centuries. Hey, Ronnie, glad to see you. Thanks, Rusty. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So way back in the day, it wasn't considered crazy to actually bury people in the walls of churches. And you really didn't have to be wealthy or famous for that to happen. You could be one of the most rich or the most high-ranking folks in that area, all the way down to the orphan that shook a can on the street corner. Didn't matter who you were. You could be buried in the walls of the church. Now, the priests and the other prominent Catholics in the parish were all buried in the floor there. As a matter of fact, Anthony Dominic Peltier, which was the first bishop of the San Fernando Cathedral, is buried under the head of the main aisle of the church. And there by the sanctuary railings, you can also find some remains of the officers that defended the Alamo. Cool stuff, Hunter Mish. So that kind of explains why folks are claiming to see faces appearing on the exterior and interior walls of the church. Now, there's a whole lot of photos out there, y'all, and some of them you can make out a gaping mouth or two sunken-in eyes, and some of them say they've seen skulls as well. I've seen a few of these pictures, and they don't look tampered. They actually look exactly how they're being described, so that may be something you want to Google at some point in time. But besides the skulls and the faces that pop up on the walls there have also been reports of these shadowy ghost figures spotted wandering around all over the grounds there. Now, there's also a dark and looming silhouette of a man that hangs out there, too. There was this one chick that was on a ghost tour there who had a pretty cool experience with tall, dark, and spooky one night. She says she's standing there listening to the tour guide ramble on about all the history, and she looks up to see this guy in a dark suit walk up and join the back part of the line, and kind of looked like he was in period drag, so she assumed that maybe he was another tour guide or, you know, the next guide for the next group or something. So she didn't pay a whole lot of mind. Well, they walk through the church, and the tour guide's giving them the whole rundown on everything, and this dude's following them step by step. And when they go to leave from out of the church, they get to the exit. Well, the girl was one of the last ones in line, so she turns around to see if this guy is still behind him. Well, he was for just a second, but the second she latched her eyes onto him, he disappeared into thin air. So when they get outside the church, she's telling the tour guide that this dude had been with them the whole time. She describes him, and the tour guide just kind of laughs, and she says, yep, you're one of many who have spotted this gentleman. So he apparently makes frequent appearances there and likes to tag along with the tour and maybe hear what all the tour guide has to say. Maybe he's keeping her in line, making sure she's telling the story right. So now we've got phantom faces, tall, dark, and creepy. The only thing we've been missing are ghostly monks. And guess what? You can find those here too. It's like in Louisiana. We got that, right? So these guys are seen most frequently out on the spirits or out on the outside of the cathedral. Now, most folks have reported seeing them by the walls and close to the doors of the cathedral. But according to some folks that have seen them, it's really easy to make them out because it's a black silhouette, but as you can focus on, or if you can get close enough to see them, you can obviously see the hood pulled over their head. But if you're ever out there in that area and you're taking pictures and you're on your tour and you think you may see them, hurry up and snap a picture because they don't stick around very long. They're in and out from what everybody says. And then there's this cool little story here too. It's Halloween in 2007, and these workers are there in the middle of a restoration project. Now they're getting all the old crumbling plaster from off the original stone, and once they finished doing that, the plan was, of course, to replaster all of the original stone and make it look like new again. Obviously not tampering with the bodies that are inside the walls, they're just making the outside of the walls look pretty. Well, even though all this construction's going on, the cathedral was still open for visitors. So one of these visitors just happened to be touring the San Fernando with his handheld video camera. And he's shooting the marble sarcophagus in the very back. Now, the sarcophagus is said to be cool to the touch at all times, no matter what the temperature in the church is. And there on the floor beside it is a seal on the ground that actually confirms the cathedral's age. Well, while this dude's filming, he captured the image of a man kissing a skull on the head. So, of course, he panicked because he knew he was the only person right there in that area. And the image he'd just seen, it wasn't there when he started filming. So Google that, folks. It's a pretty phenomenal piece of video. I actually have seen that as well, and there's no denying what this dude claims that he saw there. It's there. So now we're going to leave the church house, and we're going to head over to Pine Barrens, New Jersey. Does that sound familiar to any of you guys? It really didn't ring a bell with me until I started looking at some of the legends that are attached to the Pine Barrens. Now, this little stretch of woods is like 1 million acres. It spans 7 different counties in New Jersey. Now, the area was originally settled by the Lenape Indians way back in the day, and I'm talking like 1200 AD. And of course, everything was cool for them for a while, at least until 1694, when all these Europeans start coming around, right? Well, these folks just came on the scene like, it's on, y'all, and they start building these little settlements all over the place. Well, needless to say, these Indians weren't exactly thrilled, right? That would kind of be like me waking up in the morning and finding that somebody had set up a used car lot on my front yard while I wasn't looking. And y'all got a pretty good idea how well that would go over, right? So, Jersey Devil, Whaley is on it. She knows. So, yeah, eventually the Indians got fed the hell up, right? But not before the settlers had established a booming little metropolis there. In fact, most of the ore that was used in the Revolutionary War came from this particular little area. But there was other stuff that was going on there too, like cotton farming and sawmills and paper mills and all kind of stuff. Well, after all these little settlements popped up and became established, coal was discovered in Pennsylvania. Well, that was one hell of a financial draw right there. So everybody packed up their stuff and they went to go resettle in these little mining towns because they're going to make bank, right? Well, at that point, the Pine Barrens looked exactly like that, barren. All of these little towns were just abandoned. Everything was deserted. Nobody hung around there except for the spirits of the folks that had been stuck in the ground there, right? So, yeah, the Pine Barrens has reports of just countless ghosts there, but there are a few that actually stand out. Now, the first one, this is pretty cool, y'all, is the ghost of Captain Emilio Carranza. Now, this dude was a Mexican pilot, and he was considered one of the greatest aviators in Mexican history. Now, Carranza, who was a friend of Charles Lindbergh, flies to America on a goodwill mission in 1928. Well, after Lindbergh had made his flight to Mexico City, this dude wasn't fixed to be outdone, right? So he sets off for home in the middle of an electrical storm, and of course, after he's ignored all these warnings, he winds up dying when his plane goes down in the Sandy Ridge area, somewhere thereabouts. So all of his fans and family go and put up this monument for him there. Well, as soon as this monument is erected, these weird footprints suddenly appear on the outside of it. And nobody can explain where the hell they came from, and they don't come off. They've been cleaned, they've been buffed, the footprints are still there. So the locals will tell you, if you park at the gate of his memorial and you call out Emilio 3 times, look up because you'll see his plane going by overhead. Now, besides Emilio, there's a little boy that haunts Burnt Mill Road there at the Atco area. Now, this kid was killed in a hit and run. Apparently, he's still pretty pissed off. Folks say that he'll appear there on the side of the road where he died, and apparently he's still looking for the bastard that ran him over. Now, another frequently spotted spirit there belongs to James Steele. Steele was an African-American doctor who was lynched when the wrong people found out that he'd been practicing medicine. His ghost can be seen wandering around the spot where his house used to be. Now, folks say that he's a friendly spirit and that he's been known to help people who go out in that area and get lost or wind up getting hurt. So beyond all this madness is the most creepy resident of Pine Barrens, and Whaley's already tossed that one out for us. That's the Jersey Devil. And here's his or its or whatever. Here's the Jersey Devil legend anyway, whatever it is. So this critter was supposed to have been born to a local chick in 1735. Now, Miss Leeds had already had 12 kids. Now, that's a freaking horror in itself right there. What is in the water here? Anyway, rumor had it that she told her friends and family that the devil could take the next one. There wouldn't be a next one, but okay, whatever, that's fine. So it looks like that might have actually happened. Now, Miss Leeds was said to have been a witch, and her husband was accused of being the devil himself. But legend says this baby was born normal, and as soon as it breathed its first breath, it transformed into this hideous beast, and then it screeched and it turned on the midwife and murdered her, and then it flew off through the chimney. So they described this baby as having leathery wings and hooves and a horse's head and a forked tail. And damn, if it had been a female, that's a perfect description for Big Johnny Blender's ex-wife. Anyway, it's said that the local clergy tracked this little beast down and performed an exorcism in 1740. And the priest took credit for holding the beast at bay for the next 80 years. But of course, he did resurface, else we wouldn't be talking about him tonight, right? So in 1820, there was a very famous gentleman that spotted this critter. Joseph Bonaparte, yeah, Napoleon's brother. He claimed to have seen the beast on the grounds of his estate. And then after that, according to legend, Commodore Stephen Decatur spotted the beast while he was visiting his Hanover millworks. He was there to inspect his cannonballs as they were being forged. Well, the Commodore looks up and he sees this creature flying around above him that matched the description of the Jersey Devil. So he orders his men to fire a cannonball at the critter, and it actually hit him. Hey, Amy, how's everybody doing this evening? But even though they hit this creature with the cannonball, it didn't have any effect on him. So then in the 1840s and again in the 1920s, there were these massive livestock killings. And, you know, I didn't find it in this research, but it seems like back in the 90s, there was a lot of talk of the Jersey Devil causing livestock killings. But anyway, the locals were claiming that, of course, it was the work of the Jersey Devil. But besides the livestock, he was also responsible for taking other animals and children. Now, of course, the children were never found, but the animals' badly mangled remains were. Now, in January 1909, sightings and attacks for some reason just spiked and went off the charts. These freaking locals were in a panic. They closed the schools down, and they put a $10,000 bounty on the head of the Jersey Devil. Well, legends of sightings endured frequently, and even up until the 50s and 60s. But now most everybody had access to cameras during these times. So photographs were being produced of this unexplainable beastly oddity, as well as pictures of hoofed footprints that it left behind. So yeah, something was definitely rattling around in the woods in this area. And with these newly produced photographic evidence, nobody could blame it on acid or LSD, right? So still today, there's reports of sightings or animal mutilations in the area. Not nearly as frequently as they were back in the day, but the Jersey Devil does still seem to be making his rounds over there. Now, also in the Pine Barrens, there's another little legend that's tied in there. And this is the Devil's Puddle that we're talking about. Now, this little lagoon is somewhere near Winslow, and it's known for some serious supernatural activity. Now, some folks think that the water has healing abilities, but they'll warn you, if you go there to get some water, you better watch yourself, because the Devil's Puddle is closely guarded by evil spirits, and this place is creepy as hell. It's absolutely silent there. There's no animal sounds, no insect sounds. There's no sounds at all around this pool. And the water is always cold. As a matter of fact, it's unexplainable why the water is always 58 degrees year-round, no matter what. So, like I said, if you're there to grab you a little bit of water just to test that whole healing ability thing, you better be careful, because the locals will tell you that these ghostly hands will pop up from beneath the surface of the water and grab you and pull your ass down into a watery grave. Now, there's not a whole lot of folks that have lived to tell about their experience there, but the ones that have will tell you that they could feel these icy cold hands pulling them down beneath the water. Now, according to local reports, several people have drowned or died in the Devil's Puddle for unknown reasons. Now, folks would just kind of be walking along, and all of a sudden they'd look over and see this body floating around in the water. And the kicker with that was that the corpse would always have scratch marks on their legs and ankles. And one body in particular was found with a broken neck and gaping holes where their eyes used to be. So there's also more than just hands there. A lot of folks have reported seeing the image of specters floating in, above, and around this puddle. And along with these dudes, there's unexplained patches of quicksand that pop up and will swallow you whole and then all of a sudden disappear. There's a whole lot of different stories that go way back. Some of them that include horses and carriages being swallowed up by this sand, and then all of a sudden the ground just goes back level like it was before, like nothing ever happened there. So might be a cool little place to visit. Just don't go along. Make sure you have a camera. Maybe broadcast live, so if you do disappear, at least somebody will know where to dig your ass out from. But in the meanwhile, I do have a couple of announcements to make. Amy Centers reminded me that we have been confirmed for Night Risers. That is in E-Town, Kentucky on October 27th and 28th. And we also had an announcement today that we have been confirmed for Gulf Coast Fan Fest. That is in Biloxi, Mississippi. We will be there with the Adrian's Fury Dragster. I believe that is the week before Night Risers, also in October. So that's going to be freaking awesome. And it's my understanding, Susie, that you guys will be there along with Bill Gibson, Lita Ford, and, of course, Christine. So that is going to be way cool. Somebody please save up some bail money for me, because it's going to be wild. I can see it coming. Also, let's see what else is coming up. July. We should be racing in July in South Carolina. We'll keep, oh yeah, I said Christine. So we'll keep you posted on that. If you're anywhere near Orangeburg and want to hit the racetracks, we'll let you know if we're going to be out there. So in the meanwhile, as things progress and as other dates are confirmed, of course, I'll let you know. But I am old. I did live through the 80s, and there were a lot of brain cells back in between 1987 and 1999 that will never come back. So always check Facebook at Southern Horror Queen or authorlyngibson.com. As a matter of fact, spend a little time on my website. There's some pretty cool stuff there. You can hook up with all my books there. You can catch my blogs, see all my videos, photos from past events, a schedule that is ever changing with the Adrian's Fury Dragster. But there's all kind of cool stuff going on the page. You'll probably enjoy what you see there. And also, like I said, if you need more than one day of creepy in your life, always go to my blog. Right there on the homepage, you'll see a link for it at authorlyngibson.com. Just click and you can find plenty of creepy to get you through till next Tuesday. But in the meanwhile, thank all you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And if I don't see it before then, I'll see you back here next Tuesday when you're here to get your creepy on with me. Y'all behave. And, of course, like I always tell you, keep it creepy. Because you know that's what I'm going to do.